Today, we have a very special story for you. We're going to walk through Modern Horizons 3 from first to last, from vision design throughout long months of set design and a final playtest push. And to do that, we have an amazing group of guests. Starting with our first guest, please welcome on stage lead developer of Modern Horizons 3, Michael Majors. Hello, Michael. How are you doing?
Great. Thank you for having me.
Welcome here on stage. So, obviously, Modern Horizons 3 has Modern as its main focus. What was your relationship with Modern?
Yeah, so I mean, as a competitive player, which is what I used to be before coming to work at Wizards, I always loved Modern because to me it's kind of what represents the most pure form of creativity and deck building as far as a 60-card constructed format, kind of like a non-commander competitive format where you have this giant sandbox of cards and all these opportunities to mix and match things. And you know, for me personally, I always got the most enjoyment from Magic by building decks and just finding creative ways to use it as my outlet as far as mixing and matching different ideas. So that's what I've always loved about Modern.
Great. And what were or are now the biggest goals with the Modern Horizons sets?
Yeah, so you know, back in 2017, this was shortly after I came to Wizards, we had this thing we called a hackathon, which was basically a week-long sprint where people kind of drop their normal responsibilities and kind of go off the beaten path and try to find interesting new things to do at Wizards of the Coast. And something that came out of that shortly after I came to Wizards was, you know, kind of what we dubbed Time Spiral 2. And so Time Spiral was like this wonderful set for enfranchised players. It took, you know, references from the past and all these like weird mechanical mashups. And you know, the thing was, new players kind of hated it, but people who had like played Magic for a long time loved it. So there was this idea. It's like, okay, well, these sets are a little too complicated for new players that are just getting into the game, but for folks who, you know, kind of have that history of Magic and understand the callbacks and, you know, have that history of mechanical depth, there's still something there that is different than our standard frontless products. So there came this idea, let's do like a, you know, a Time Spiral 2, and then eventually there was this idea to make it Modern legal. And so that's kind of the beginning to, you know, what is the goal? It's to be a love letter to Magic, be nostalgic, and really reward people for their engagement in Magic long term.
And how did you get involved with Modern Horizons 3 in particular?
Yeah, so like I said, this was shortly after I came to Wizards in 2017. I had played tons of Modern, you know, especially like in the Star City circuit that was very popular at the time. I worked for them, and I played tons of Modern on the Open Series, and it was just something that I loved. And I was like, okay, well, like I have Modern expertise. I would love to work on this project. You know, I've been involved in Magic basically all my life, and this is, you know, something that really spoke to me.
That's great. So in the beginning, I said that the first part is vision design. So what exactly does vision design do?
Yeah, so vision design with all products and including Modern Horizons 3 is basically where you don't necessarily have like a really robust card file yet, but we're trying to figure out, you know, what is kind of the skeleton of the set, what are the core pillars, maybe mechanics, or, you know, for a traditional frontless standard product, it would be like, you know, what world are we on, who are the major characters at play. But for Modern Horizons in particular, it's kind of, you know, I view it as, you know, kind of out of place, out of time canonically. So we have basically access to anything we want, characters that might be alive or dead, mechanics that we, you know, have used throughout Magic's history. And it's like, okay, well, what are the different kind of conceits that we can draw from to, you know, ground ourselves in what this product will be?
And what goals do you wanted to accomplish here with the vision design for Modern Horizons 3?
So, Aaron Forsyth and Eric Lauer were the kind of like co-leads of vision design for Modern Horizons 3. And basically what they came up with is like, okay, what are some things that we can take that we're not necessarily likely to do in standard environments anytime soon, and then we can kind of use those as pillars for the new set. So some things that they landed on were energy and Eldrazi, which we, you know, probably are not likely to reuse in a standard set anytime soon. So like these are really cool core pillars that we could use to not only do something kind of different and off the beaten path, but also potentially bring them up to a modern power level that would be interesting. And then just like another cool selling point of the set would be, let's revisit the Magic Origins Flip Planeswalkers. So we did a new suite of those where we essentially show the sparking moment for a Planeswalker and how they came to be.
That's great. So here, when you started working on the vision design, was it a blank piece of paper, or did you already had aligned some pieces of the puzzle of what you wanted for the set?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of both. So like, you know, they basically worked by themselves, and then they would kind of come back to me and Carmen, who will be joining us shortly, and be like, you know, are these interesting ideas? Is there like, you know, is there space here that we can mine potentially to include in Modern? Or just like, you know, here's like all these execution of various mechanics, maybe the cards are a little raw or whatever, but like, is there something that y'all can use, you know, just material? And so it's like, you know, it's a very collaborative process, back and forth, and that's going to be a theme of all of this, of course, is just, you know, we're going back and forth. It's like, all right, is there an interesting idea that we can use here in the future, even if it's a little unrefined? So, yeah, long story short, basically, a core pillars of like very interesting ideas, but unrefined card files.
Great. So for us watching that we don't know what's going on, how many people exactly usually are on vision design?
Yeah, so in this case, it was just 4 of us, thereabouts, where it was, you know, primarily, like I said, Aaron and Eric were kind of coming up with the broad strokes ideas, and then they would solicit feedback from a bunch of people, but primarily Carmen and myself.
And how long do you have to work on this vision design part?
I think this one was about 6 months, 9 months, give or take.
And when that finishes, what is the state that the set is on before the set design part, which is our next part?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was basically like, you know, here's like our core mechanics. So we're gonna, you know, do this energy and Eldrazi stuff. We've got some double face cards, which are, you know, again, the Magic Origins style flip planeswalkers that we had done in the past. And then we're also going to include some additional double face cards in the set as well. And then just, you know, kind of a hodgepodge of various mechanics and different executions that we could use.
So at this point, we already have a vision, but we don't yet have a card file packed with hundreds of cards that might not make it into our favorite set. That means we need set design. And for us, we need more guests. Please welcome on stage set designers Carmen Complarence and Megan Smith. Let's hear it for them. Hello, welcome on stage. How are you doing?
I can't complain too awful much.
Oh, I can complain.
Okay, Carmen, let's start with you. What's your relationship with Magic and Modern?
Okay, so I have been playing Magic since I was like 10, 12 years old, longer than a lot of people have been alive. Modern's probably my favorite format. When I first got in the building, one of the first things I asked was, can I work on Modern Horizons too, right? And my manager went, that one has already sailed, unfortunately. But it did help open the door for me to be able to work on Modern Horizons 3 a little bit earlier in the process than otherwise would be normal for a play designer.
That's great. So how exactly did you end up here on Modern Horizons 3? Was it just because you had this interest in Modern Horizons 2?
So in general, I've always had my fingers in a lot of different parts of Magic, right? Before I worked for Wizards of the Coast, I started out with Star City Games. I wrote scripts for The Professor over at Tolarian Community College. I've done a little bit of everything, which is nice because it means that a lot of the sort of referential stuff that you'll see in these Modern Horizons sets comes very natural to me because I've just sort of lived it for a very long time. So there are a lot of in-jokes that we'll kind of get to talk about a little bit later that are just things that I would joke about in meetings and people went, oh, okay, yeah, write that down, write that down.
Right, so you have an amazing background. How did you see your role coming into this set?
The big one that gets brought up the most, I think, is I just know a lot of Magic cards, and that's from the perspective of someone who works at the Magic the Gathering factory, where everyone knows a lot of cards. Among that group, I know a lot of cards.
Okay, and Megan, what about you? What is your involvement with Magic, your background?
I feel a little bit like a broken record because I also was a player that came from the pool of grinders. I wasn't on the grind for very long, but I did have a couple of modest finishes Modern was my favorite of the formats. I love Modern and Legacy the most. So I was headhunted to come work on a little mobile game called Spellslingers. If you've heard of it, congratulations.
Woo, Spellslingers!
But I always wanted to stay close to Magic, so I always wanted to be on a set or have one foot in the door for Magic, and eventually transferred over to Magic full-time from Spellslingers to work on the casual play design team, which is a team that works on new player products, Jumpstart, primarily Commander, but we touch every product that we make to make sure that it's friendly and fun to new players, players who want to play casually, as well as competitively. So from there, I was invited to join the Council of Colors as the Green Color Pie Counselor, where we basically are a collection of individuals who oversee all the cards that are released to make sure that they are following color pie philosophy, which is basically like saying we want the cards to act and feel like the colors that they are, and don't act or feel like other colors. And that's what makes Magic so vibrant, is the color pie philosophy keeps everything feeling distinct and fresh. And from there, I got invited to work on Modern Horizons.
Amazing. So, Michael, Modern Horizons usually is associated with Modern, which is more of a competitive format. How important was to have Megan on the team for this commander part and more fun part of the game?
Oh, it's super important. I mean, like I talked about previously, part of Modern Horizons' promise is being this love letter to old Magic fans and bringing back that nostalgia. So, not only does it have the primary goal, in name, of being relevant for competitive Modern, but we also want it to have tons of general commander appeal and also just kind of hit those nostalgic callbacks that Carmen's been alluding to, as far as just old school Magic players or just people that have a really long history for the game and love for it. So, I really wanted someone who was an expert in Commander, but of course still, cared about or had an interest in Modern. So I expressed this to Ms. Melissa Del Toro, who is the lead of the casual play design team. She was like, I got the perfect person for you, Megan. We brought her on board, and it worked out great.
And Megan, people usually think that competitive equals serious and more casual equals fun. How much do you or does Wizards buy into this?
I think that every player finds something fun in a different way. I think that a lot of players find agency fun, and that's what a lot of competitive players gravitate towards. They want all their choices to matter. They like playing ponders and brainstorms because it makes them feel smart, it makes them feel clever. But casual players like that too. But maybe they lean more towards engines. I myself love utility creatures and engines. I'm a Hogak apologist. I loved feeling like I was doing something absolutely broken by making tutus and doing all this cool stuff. But it's about finding that fun for everybody and making sure that there is something for everybody.
On that, you are someone that straddles both Modern and Commander as well. How do you feel the balance representing both those audiences that are so different?
It's really hard, but I think thinking about who you're designing the card for is what we talk about every time we make a new card, is like, who is going to be interested by this card? Who's going to want to play this card? And making sure that that card is as appealing as possible to as many people as possible will make sure that it finds that home and make sure that it gets to the players who really want it. We like to create sandboxes. I think Modern Horizons 3 is a great example of a sandbox where it has something for everybody in it, and you just have to dig in and find it.
Great. So at this point, you're working on Modern Horizons 3 full-time. But at Wizards, what does that mean to work full-time on a set?
As a member of the team, it's maybe something like 10 to 12 hours. It's a couple of 2-hour meetings a week, plus a couple of intermittent design meetings. But for the leads, they're on the set for about 90% of their time. They're wholly devoted to making sure that that set runs perfectly.
So Michael, Megan just said that you will have a lot of meetings going on, but they're all not the same, right? They are different meetings?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we kind of follow the classic design and iteration process where, essentially you create or prototype things, you playtest them, and then you iterate on that playtest feedback, and it just kind of continues this perpetual circle where essentially the work never ends until time runs out, and then you got to ship a product, and it is what it is. But within that that parameter of just this cyclical design process, we do a variety of different things. And we also, again, we have all those audiences to fulfill, right? So, a lot of people, the primary way that they engage in Magic is limited. They just love drafting or playing sealed deck. And so, we put a lot of time and care into making sure that the limited environment is robust and, interesting and replayable. Sometimes we'll have meetings where it's just, we have 30 rare holes because we, solicited feedback from the studio, and they were like, these rares kind of suck. So we're like, okay, well, I guess we're just going to start again. And then, it's like, all right, well, I need the team to come up with 15 rares in the next week or two. So it just kind of depends on the situation and how we're feeling about where we are in the process and where we need to set our priorities. But the point is that every day you're kind of solving a different problem, and it's just depends on where we are in the process.
That's great.
Yep. By the time we got onto the set, the archetypes were mostly locked, which is where a lot of the design work goes into, is trying to make sure that all the archetypes interlock together or blend well together. So a lot of the things that we have to work on is making sure that they do blend. So along with the rares, it's pulling out the cards that are intended to blend archetypes and saying, are they working? Are they not? Can we make them better for those roles? And just trying to tweak and tune those little things so that it feels more smooth.
Right, and it really just comes down to what phase of the process you're in, right? I know y'all talked a little bit about vision design earlier. That's when you get to be really blue skies about, okay, if we're gonna do energy, how are we gonna do it? If we're gonna do modified, what are the color pairs that's gonna be in? And I think in set design, we really only changed the blue-black archetype to be the sort of card draw control matters thing, but other than that, yeah, it was just kind of the 9 archetypes, tweaking numbers, going great. What's a white common that works in all of the archetypes and so on.
We had 3 wedges, and then it's all right, we need to fill in some gaps because that doesn't fill out
People like
everything.
affinity? Yeah.
All right, well, we got some living weapon. Let's make a few artifacts.
Yeah.
So Megan, we have the leading meetings. What comes next?
So when we've had the meetings, we need feedback to make sure that we made all the changes that work. So part of that process is playtesting, which is the #1 way that we get our feedback. So internally, we have playtests that are run by designers, but also playtests that are run by people that are in the building, just WotC staff that are around. So we have people from the art department, world building, legal. I've had people from the WPN team come down and play. And it's mostly just to make sure we're getting as big of a variety as feedback as possible, different skill levels, different enfranchisement levels. Along with that, we also do what we call CI playtest, which is consumer insights. It's where we actually go out and we actually ask people that are not WotC staff to come play our games for us. We have a company that does that for us. They're called Blink. They're great, but they help us get a variety of demographics, make sure they're kind of hitting all of those spots of new players, older players, players who have never touched a Magic card, to players that have played for 30+ years. So once we get that feedback, we take it back, we dissect it, we say, hey, what's actionable here? What can we actually change in the file to answer whatever problems the players are identifying, and then rinse and repeat over and over until we're satisfied.
And Michael, as the lead developer, how much of what you do is listen to others rather than listening to your own thoughts and relying on your ideas?
Oh, a ton. I mean, a big part of the job is, empowering the people on your team to, do what they're best at, and also just to make sure that you are not relying on just your own biases and making sure that you're taking in all as much information as you can, and you try to solicit that from as many sources as you can. And then, as soon as things start to become a trend, you can kind of take that as okay, well, that's probably something that I should listen to, even if I don't necessarily agree with it. But, some of it's following your intuition, and some of it's just boils down to trust.
Right, and so there's a lot where you spoke to trends a little bit. You also have to look at where the feedback's coming from in some cases in order to know what it is someone's optimizing for. So Megan, for example, is a lot of times going to be speaking in the interest of commander players. And so if the feedback is on a card that is more about modern or more about limited, then that's something that we're going to wait for one of those trends to come in. And I know some of it's even just harder for us to work with, right? Where there are a lot of people where they just don't like energy.
Right.
That was a super contentious mechanic for us to bring back. But if energy is going to be in the set, someone just saying, well, I don't like energy, is not really something we can just go, you know what? Yeah, we're going to kill it.
Yeah, let's just get rid of all of it.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So kind of figuring out context for the feedback is a really big part of that.
Great. So then we have the meetings that sound the most fun, so the design meetings.
Yeah, the design meetings I think are my favorite. It's where you get to take everything that's in your brain and put it on paper, and you get to show off how cool and clever you are and how fun you can design Magic cards. But one of the points of the design meetings is to start designing those cards that get people's brains to kind of itch and scratch and say hey, that's kind of a weird card. What can we do with all this stuff? One of my favorite things to design are rares, obviously, because they're fun, they're splashy, they're exciting, they're sometimes expensive. So one of my favorite ones was Arna, I always call this card Anna Karenina, because I can never pronounce Arna Kennerud was one that we designed for Commander. It's a 3-color legend. It's got a lot of different ways to build around it, but not everyone is going to build it the same way. And that's where it comes from us to make sure that each player can look at a card with fresh eyes and say, like, oh, I know exactly what to do with this card, and I bet no one else is doing it. Another fun card that we got to design were the flip walkers that Michael mentioned earlier. Coin flipping is a very casual player thing, so when you see a card that's coin flipping, a lot of competitive players will be like, oh, I don't want to flip coins, that's not my thing.
Don't tell that to the Ruby Storm players.
But this was a great way to blend the coin flipping, which a lot of people see as casual, on a card that is very exciting and very splashy and does a lot of really cool and fun things. And that's what the design meetings are all about, is making sure that those cards appeal to a variety of different players. Casual, serious, competitive, all types.
Yeah, and I just love, one of the best parts for me as the lead designer was just like, okay, let's get a bunch of folks in a room, jot down as many ideas as you can, let's just all go through them, and even if you don't necessarily have like the design we 100% are going to land on, it's just like, let's get a kernel from one person and from another person, like, where are these cool ideas that we can mix and match together?
Sometimes it's just like one line of text.
Exactly.
You're just like, all right, that's a card.
Right, totally.
That's
yeah.
a card.
And it's like, okay, well, scrap everything else you wrote. I really like this one idea. Okay, now let's throw it all out. All right, how do we take this one idea and make the coolest card possible? And so just, having that freedom is some of the most fun part of the job.
One of the things that I love the most about Modern Horizons 3 is that it is full of nostalgia and Easter eggs. Who is responsible for these?
Carmen!
Okay, Carmen, show us how it's done.
Okay, so there are a bunch of sort of remixes, as we'll call them, that are in the set, and there are a lot of different ways that you can make them. So one of the ones that you see a lot in Modern Horizons 3 are things like Null Drifter is one of my favorites. This is one that we call sort of a top-down reference, where we go, all right, Mole Drifter is something we know. How do we take this concept and turn this into a mechanical Magic card? And in this case, we wanted to figure out how to Eldrazi-fy Mole Drifter. The other way to come about it is what we call bottom-up, where we solve for the mechanics first and then go, is this close to something we know? Jolted Awake is an example of something that we kind of had the idea of energy, bring something back from the graveyard before we had anything else to go off of. And we ended up adding cycling, so we were like, oh, this is kind of like on Earth. This is cool. And then we have these super on-the-nose referential things like Serum Visionary, where this is just Elvish Visionary, Serum Vision smashed together, and it does exactly what it says on the tin,
That's great, Carmen. I mean, that's one of my favorite cards to draft. Now, what about some of your favorites?
Okay, so one of these is my favorite card I've ever gotten to help make. Don't... if I start laughing. So Witch Enchanter is one. This is super inside baseball, and this is one that is bottom up. We had the MDFCs in the set where we knew we were going to do this, and then we had to kind of figure out the mechanics of what they want to be, and one of them we thought of is, what if we had a sort of Reclamation Sage-esque card? A lot of the times, I was kind of running the computer in the meeting while Majors was figuring out the actual content of the meeting. And so I ended up plugging in a bunch of playtest names. And this one, I just threw in Witch Enchanter, which is sort of a reference to how whenever someone starts to cast a spell that starts with dis, you'll say, Witch member, dismember, or Witch spell, dispel. And this one is Witch Enchanter, Disenchanter. Right, cast Disenchant. And that was something that that's not really what a witch does in our game, and I don't really know why something that's an enchanter would destroy enchantments, but I swear every playtest that someone casts the card, the other person would go, wait, oh. It just brought a ton of people joy. Another one is just Fire Balance. So this is a riff, kind of an update on the card Counterbalance, which is when any legacy player or old extended player knows is a riff on sort of you counter spells and you don't really get to play the game that much, but I always thought the moment of a blind flip, of not knowing what's going to happen, was so exciting. So getting to find a way to bring that into a sort of new mechanical expression that's fun instead of being paralyzing. Love that card. And finally, Brain Surge, I think it's Brain Surge. It was Brain Squall in playtesting, but getting to actually play with Brainstorm in Modern was something that everyone's always kind of dreamed of because it's fun. You can set up your miracles, you can put away your bad cards, and actually finding a way that was safe to play in Modern, and I think some people are even playing it in the Pro Tour, is really exciting. So I love Brain Surge.
That's very exciting. Can we finish off with some really deep cuts?
Okay, so this is one where a lot of times I was not the only sort of Vorthos person in the room. Shout out to Ethan Fleischer, who brought in the deepest cuts of them all. But some of the ones that I really liked kind of having a big hand on in the set, Genku Future Shaper is one of them. So this is one where he really only gets a couple of paragraphs in a story in Aether Revolt. At the time we were working on this, a lot of the newer Tomio lore hadn't been released yet, so I hadn't gotten to read it. But this was one that we actually worked really hard on, and someone very nice and generous ended up commissioning a lot of extra token artwork to let the entire family fit on this one. Tomio is my favorite planeswalker, so this one was really special to me to get to have. Frogmere Enforcer is another one that feels a little bit inside baseball, where you kind of have to know to really get it, but it literally is a reference inside a reference, where you have the big Mirror Enforcer, or it can be Frogmite as the 4-mana 2/2. So it's just a little cute thing. And then finally, Psychic Frog was one that has a very special place in my heart. This was actually not this exact design, but the base pitch of it was the first card I ever made. So this was an old design workshop we had internally, where it's like, hey, what's a sort of modern twist on an old messed up card? And Psychic Frog was a riff on the card Psychotog, which is just an old, just extended favorite, I guess legacy favorite, type 1.5 favorite feels more fitting.
Now we're aging ourselves.
Right, yeah, exactly. But this is one that I adore, that we actually got to fit into the set, and it feels like a real spiritual successor to the card.
Yeah, thankfully, a few less teeth.
Oh, I actually got an altar last week.
Oh, no.
Drew the teeth on it.
Terrible.
Great guy. I adore it. I adore it.
Terrifying.
That's great. And we talked how long does vision design take? What about set design? How long does it take?
About 9 months?
9 months?
Yeah, give or take.
Yeah.
And after that, what is the state of the set?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we still need to go through the development process, which we're about to get into next in our story with Brad. But we have a lot of content. Hopefully, it's a little unrefined, but we have the starting of a good place for developers to come into and just really sink their teeth into the cards and make sure they got the right numbers and words on them.
That's great. But we still have one more big piece of the puzzle. We still need to play test all these things. So please help me get on stage the one, the only former player of the year, Brad Nelson. Come on, everyone, let's hear it for Brad.
Hey!
Hello. Brad, you are all over the place. We love to see you. How did you come up and working with Modern Horizons 3 in particular?
I guess a lot of luck, actually. So I lived out in the area for Modern Horizons 2, and that went really well. Came in with a good friend of mine and roommate at the time, Brian Bronduin. So when Modern Horizons 3 came around, Dan Musser, who was on the team, ended up inviting us back out in late 2022. So it was actually, we only had a brief amount of time before coming out again.
And before these 5 weeks that you have at Wizards to play test, were you given like anything to practice? Were you giving anything, or you just didn't know anything about the set before?
Yeah, so we were told not to spend too much time that's not, during the contract time to work on things, but we did get a week with the file, and so we had Modern Horizons 3 as a file, as well as a curated list of cards that would come out before Modern Horizons 3, but we could play test with it. So we had a lot of cards for about a week before I flew out to look through, and that took mostly that week. So Brian and I dug together and got a lot of our Rust off during that time.
And I'm very curious to know, what was your first impression once you saw the card file?
They're making a Gandalf. I was mostly focused on a lot of the Lord of the Rings cards. They were really cool. But as I dug into Modern Horizons 3, I was very excited about 2 things in particular. And the first was Eldrazi. I was a huge Eldrazi Tron fan, not player, because I never thought it was good enough in Modern to take to the tournament. So I was very excited to see that, we're taking more shots at it, and I'm going to get to play it in Modern again. And then the other thing, energy. Energy was part of my career the entire time. Like, I think my brother who's
Corey's
out there, Corey's out here.
Shout out to Corey, let's hear it. Great job at the Pro Tour.
Yeah, I think there was a Grand Prix season where either Corey or I won almost every single Grand Prix with an energy deck.
Yes. So you're talking about Corey. He obviously is part of the Pro Tour.
Yeah.
What about you? Before this time at Wizards and at Modern Horizons 3, were you already paying attention on what's going on in Modern in the real world, or not really?
I should say yes, but no. I was very
There's a
focused.
lot of trust.
Okay.
We talked about that.
Yeah. No, I was very focused on my now non-professional Magic playing job, but it's not that hard to get back up on the bicycle and start riding, and that's what that week really helped with. So, I spent a lot of time focusing on not only the new set, but the format and getting engaged. And truth be told, I helped make some of the cards that were in the decks already, so it was fine.
That's great. And tell us about your experience in the playtesting team.
Oh, yeah. So, the playtesting team was great. Obviously, Michael Majors and I, we used to test all the time at for the Pro Tours when you lived out in Roanoke with us. And so we got a lot of time working together. And then Brian Braunduin's also somebody that we tested with, who's a good friend of mine. Carmen, who we didn't get a ton of time together, I was blown away during the playtest time that you are just an encyclopedia of knowledge. Like,
Yeah, I've already told the story on Twitter. I just remember there was one where it's like you're playing with a card and you go, oh, I need this to beat this other thing. And I'm like, yeah, just switch to this mechanic while typing. And you're just like, how do you just do that?
Yeah, I stopped using Gather. I just didn't need to. Mason Clark, who I didn't have a lot of experience with before that, found a ton of, effectively me from 10 years ago, which was just playing all the tournaments, knew about all of the competitive decks, and was a resource of knowledge at very much the macro level of Modern. Like, how do these matchups play out against each other? What cards should we be including in them? Because you want to build the new strategies, but you also want to make sure that you understand how all the cards are going to fit, and the old decks are going to evolve with them. And then lastly, we had Dan Musser, who kind of kept it all together. That's making sure that we had all of our cards and that we were on task and things like that. I like to use the term herding cats because as contractors, we can really come in and we'll have very strict days, but then we'll also have a few days where we're just kind of goofing off.
That's great. So you said that Carmen was like the Magic encyclopedia. What did you see your role here in this set in the playtest team?
So I kind of defaulted to what I used at Pro Tour testing. So for over a decade, I spent at least 8 weeks out of the year with a dedicated group. We would travel, we would test for all the upcoming Pro Tours. And from that experience, I learned that I'm better in a facilitator role. So I just identify all the strengths of all of the teammates and then execute what people needed. And the team was very deep, and there's a lot of, Brian Braunduin was very good at synergistic strategies. Mason, again, just was very good at a lot of the existing archetypes. And so I kind of just felt like I would be better at being the enemy of everyone and making sure that the gauntlet of strategies stayed updated, and really tried to stress test everyone's ideas.
That's great. I think we are all curious to know, what does a day in the life looks like when you're working in these sets?
It is a lot of what you think it is. It's, come in and play a ton of games, but, for a while you get to your desk, you have a computer, you look through all of the cards and see all the changes that might have happened, and then build decks, and we get like a printer that actually just prints Magic decks, which is just blows your mind. And you get your decks ready, and you just play a lot of games. I don't think it's like that for all the other play design departments. You know,
So many.
Yeah, your printer works.
ours didn't.
So it is the same.
Yeah, and no, but like the group is taken away from regular play design because one of the things is because we're contractors and some of us can play in tournaments still. It's better to make sure that you're not seeing everything. You know, you're seeing exactly what you're focused on for integrity. So we're on a different area and we're on a different floor even and kind of in our own little area. But I kind of felt like the cool kids, you know, we're like the three people that are rolling in. And so we had people flocking in and seeing what we're doing.
You had so many people who'd be like, oh, Brad's here?
We had a lot of visitors.
Brad's
for sure.
Yeah, we did.
Oh.
That seems amazing. And Megan, I was told that during this time of the playtest, you were working on other projects. So you were here during the set design. Were you like protective of the card file? Was there any card that you felt that you really wanted to stay in the set?
Yeah, when I was working on the set, I was working as the green color pie counselor, so I wanted to push on the boundaries of what green can do. I wanted to try experimenting. Modern Horizons 3 is a great place to experiment because there's a whole bunch of weird things that can pop up. So the card that I was a little protective of that I was hoping would make it through was Springheart Nantuko, which in my mind was just a cute little Scute Swarm reference. I was like, oh my gosh, casual players are going to love this. They love cloning things. They love landfall. They love tokens. Like, this is the quintessential commander card. They come back a couple of weeks later, and they're like, we broke it in half. And I was like, oh, no. So the design got tweaked over time to eventually be what it is now. But I remember being afraid at the time. I'm like, oh, no, if it's, I don't want it to get taken out of the file. Like, I really love this card. It's so charming. And eventually we landed on the design that you see in the file now, which I think is still fun, still a quintessential commander card, but is seen playing modern, which I think is the perfect outcome.
That's great, and I'm curious. So, Brad, you're there to play test. Are you play testing as other players, like role-playing player types, or are you there just to be Brad Nelson and play like Brad Nelson would play?
Well, I can't be Brad Nelson all the time because I mostly just stayed in my lane of being a mid-range player my entire career. But at the same time, like, I'm not going to try to pretend while I'm there, right? Like my role is to make sure that cards are at the adequate power level and that the games are fun. I'm not just going to try to build decks that are not as good as I can try to build them. I tried to do that. I tried to get into Commander, and I can't just not make busted decks. It's part of it. But yeah, so. At the same time, we always get like a list of cards that we should test. So just to make sure that we hit all of the marks, we'll get like a list of 20 cards each person to at least look at, try to build decks with. Sometimes I fail. Sometimes Carm's not around to tell me how cards would synergize. So I might not build a deck around one or two, but it's important to try to build and work on all of the strategies, even though I'm not going to want to play combo decks. But that's where we talked about all the strengths. It's where, if somebody ended up wanting to give me a combo card and I couldn't figure it out, I got to hand it off to someone else.
That's true. So, as a playtest team, do you focus more on Modern Horizons 3 or Modern as a format by itself? So, like the health of the format, is it the most important part?
Yeah, I mean, everyone has their roles at Wizards, and they get to see a lot more than we do when we come in as a contractor. And so, I always consider myself more like a red team. Like if I'm coming in for a short period of time, I'm not going to be able to have the most impact. I get 5 weeks to do my job. That's it. And so my goal is to make sure that the cards in Modern Horizons are not only fun, but that they don't impact the format in negative and unenjoyable ways. So, and that could be trying to make cards powerful for certain strategies that, like potentially like 5-color domain, for example, would be one that, you want it to be a little more powerful because that's a deck that I've always liked. Tribal Flames is awesome. But then again, you just don't want to overpower everything.
Yeah, so we're talking about the playtest part of a set. Michael, what's your role during this 5-week sprint?
It's stressful, so I kind of have to wear a couple different hats. I'm on the playtest team. Of course, I'm still the lead of the set, so I'm ultimately responsible for the cards in the file. I can change them, but I'm also working with Dan Musser, who is basically the technical lead and is kind of the checks and balances, so to speak, of like he's there to both facilitate some of the logistics, but also to make sure that I'm not getting too out of hand with some of the power level of the cards. So it's a tricky situation. Like, I ultimately want to make sure that there's enough content for people, but we also need to try to stay within like a certain power level. So it's kind of a bad sign from our perspective if like we can immediately solve what's going on in the format just by playing with the cards for 5 weeks, like Brad was saying. But we also want to make sure that we're shipping an interesting set that has cards that people are going to be interested to play with for a long period of time. We don't do these sets very frequently. So, we kind of have to land in a spot where it's like, okay, this feels pretty competitive. I don't know if it's good enough, but hopefully it's close. And I don't know exactly what these cards do, but like maybe there's enough of an interesting deck building incentive to get people's, wheels turning. And, for me, that's always the most, incredible part about seeing these sets come out is just like the discourse of people talking about what the possibility space is.
And Brad, sometimes Michael's job is to listen to what you have to say, even if he doesn't want to, right?
Well, yes,
Sorry?
there is,
Looking
but there's also times where he is making these decisions when I wish he wasn't. So there was a day where Brian Braunduin and I were playing a deck of Brian's creation, which is it was a mono-white aggressive strategy, playing all of the namesakes that usually go into these strategies, the Aether Vial, but was using Drowner of Truth, which is a Simic come into play tapped land, uncommon from the set.
That's 8/8 Drowner of Truth.
It was 8/8 to be specific. At the time, it was an 8/8, and we were playing this to play it as a land, and then use a card called Flicker Wisp to turn into an 8/8 around turns 3 or 4. And it started off kind of like a meme, but Brian was just beating me with it over and over again, and we were cackling, we were having a lot of fun. And so whenever contractors are just laughing, Majors gets interested in seeing, is it fun or should I get them on task? And so Majors rolls up and comes over and hangs out with us and sees this game and is like, well, that's not real. Like, you should stop doing it. He's like, well, it's winning. Yeah, it can't be that good. And so he sits down and Brian and him start playing. And I don't know, I think I was sitting around, but all I remember is Majors loses the first game, and I haven't seen this version of Majors since he was at the Pro Tour, but after losing one game and us laughing, he just went right back into competitive mode.
It's like the gamer meme where someone's just like,
The stand up, yeah.
Swings a couple cards in the deck, maybe grabs one of the gauntlets.
I got unlucky.
Yeah, I got unlucky. I'm on the play this game. And just continues to lose, right? Continues to lose these games. And we're laughing and we're having a grand old time. The day ends, we leave. The next day, Brian and I come back and we're laughing about all the other things we're going to do with Drowner of Truth. What other ways can we get it into play earlier, flip it earlier? And we check the file and it's just changed to a 7/6. And now, keep in mind, I only understand the concept of changing cards as you get into a meeting, you discuss it as a group, and you come to a conclusion. I didn't know about this God mode where cards can just change. And so we were frustrated when Majors came into the office. I was airing out my grievances, and Majors just like, it's a limited card, just ignore it. And so then it died to an unholy truth, and that was the end of that story.
Yeah, so you're talking about cards changing. During this playtest push, how many cards were under the microscope for change, and how many actually ended up changing?
75, 100?
A lot, yeah.
And Carmen, more changes kept on coming, right?
Yeah, right. So there is a ton that ends up happening where it is just us like turning the knobs on cards, being like, let's make this a little stronger, a little weaker. Sometimes we just end up having to like completely blow something up, which becomes much harder the later it gets. But I remember there was some really weird red-white energy thing that we couldn't make work, and then CPD was just like, this is some weird esoteric thing. And we really felt a lot of pressure. We were making changes up to like the very last night. I remember we were at like a sort of farewell dinner at a local Italian place called Mariana's in Renton, where we were whining about this card, and Mason Clark just goes, yeah, I wish we could just like justify putting another Theros Beyond Death Titan in the set. The D&D book even names them. Like, what if the red-white one just was Lightning Helix? And you could have heard a pin drop. Like, there's someone who I won't name that might even be around that like has like pasta in their mouth, and it's just it was, and we were like, okay, fine, we're gonna go, 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 go. And the next morning, it was just we were printing out like 4 or 5 decks. Like, okay, maybe it's 2 mana, maybe it's this much to escape, maybe it's this many cards. And then it ended up in the most obvious place and still being pretty strong and fun. But it just like, it really speaks to like everyone kind of coming together in a lot of ways and just making sure that like every single slot in the set was the most fun that it could be.
So obviously you are very pressured against the clock. How do you find the sweet spot against the pressure of time to make the cards find that sweet spot?
Well, that's always tough because, you know, especially from the contractor position, you get such a small window to impact all of these cards. And the reality of the situation is you want to make sure that there is enough good cards in the set to make an impact, but you also have how many dials to change. And like, if you've never like designing a card top down as a Magic fan and previously is a lot easier than when you're actually sitting there and you're like, well, you can change the mana, you can change the cost, you can change the abilities. And so with that, you really want to make sure that cards are going to have an impact, you're going to make them fun, but that you're not going to, you know, hurt a format too much, you know? And one of those cards that I learned the most about was Fury when we were working on MH2, because I really liked the ability and I liked that it was powerful, but I didn't know how to appropriately balance it, you know?
Yeah. So I know that you have this saying at Wizards that you never finish working on a set, you just run out of time. Brad, what's your biggest takeaway from working on Modern Horizons 3?
I think my biggest takeaway from working on Modern Horizons 3 is that it is the most fun but also challenging job I've ever had. I don't, like, when I got to like Monday quarterback Wizards for 15 years, I can be like, this is obvious. Like, how could they make this mistake? And then when you're there and you're actually working on it, I'm saying this because I mean it, not because I'm standing on stage with them. I promise you.
What about you, Megan? What's your biggest takeaway?
My biggest takeaway, I think I learned after working on the set and after like settling in and seeing where it landed, was you have to let cards be cool. And the only way to do that is to maybe make them a little bit stronger than you want. Maybe make them a little bit scary, but in a good and fun way. So seeing where the set has landed has really taught me that, yeah, there are a lot of fun things to do in Modern Horizons 3. It's one of my favorite sandboxes. Every time I look at a card, my brain starts itching of like, how many cards do I own that can do this reliably 20 times in a game? And I think that's exactly the type of energy we want to bring to every set, is just to make every player have that feeling.
That's great. Carmen, I have to ask you the same question as well.
I'm going to go off script a little bit. I think for me, it's just the enormity of Magic, right? It's just like you walk around the halls and you just hear 10,000 people that are all so excited about Magic and all in their own ways, right? Working on this set, we were working on things like Eldrazi and Energy that to a lot of people will kind of jokingly go, that's not even old, but it is. It's so old. It's older than a lot of these people
Carmen,
have been right, yeah, no, for sure. And it's so cool where we look through literally every file when working on this, and every single set. We looked through every set working on this set, and every single one of those sets just represented a year, 2 years, in a couple cases more, of someone's life. And just like this represented a year, 5 weeks, 2 years of some of ours. It's more than 5, but it's the type of stuff that it lasts forever, and it means so much to so many people in so many different ways, and I can't stop thinking about it.
That's great. So, Brad, you were once the literal best Magic player in the world. Did playing on this set really show you why you fell in love with this game in the first place?
Yeah, at the time when I came out for Modern Horizons 3, I wasn't really playing in any tournaments, and Magic took a back seat for me. But then it kind of just like reignited my fire, and I I ended up going to a lot of local like Star City Games Opens and playing decks that I was like the test opponent. So I was like, playing Rakdos Grief and Murktide, all the decks that I got so many reps in with, and that was a ton of fun.
So much grief, and we're like, if I could sideboard, I'd beat you. I'd beat you.
Yeah, but even this weekend, after yesterday and watching the day one of the Pro Tour, I went back to my hotel and I won a box of Modern Horizons 3 on Arena.
Great. Oh.
Yeah.
I also was trying yesterday, but I just lost, so. You're literally still the best player, at least among us two. So, Michael, eventually you have to stop working on the set and see how it feels against in the real world. We have the Pro Tour right now, for example. How does that feel?
Yeah, I mean, it's been incredible. It's, kind of letting the baby bird out of the nest, so to speak. Yeah, I mean, you run out of time, and you do the best you can, and obviously, I want people to love the set and to really enjoy it and experience, that love of the creativity of Magic that is, so important to me, and I, try to impart into the set, and it's such an honor to see people playing at the Pro Tour, and of course, folks gathering, like Cartman said, in this hall and just playing Magic and having a great time. It's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, we all love the fun that you all given us with Modern Horizons 3. I loved seeing our set gets built from vision design to set design and a playtest push. Please, I want to see you cheer here for our panelists, Michael Majors, Carmen Complarence, Megan Smith, and Brad Nelson. A round of applause for them. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we hope you have a great time here at MagicCon Amsterdam. Bye-bye.